What's up, everyone? You are listening to the TV Guys. I am Matt,
And I'm Brian.
and we are going to talk about the worst character in any show as a main character. Now, let's give a disclaimer for this because there are some shows that are like the main character is terrible, and that's the point of the main character.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen the show House? House is an awful person, and we all know that he's an awful person. Have you seen House of Cards? Both of those have house in it. House of Cards. You're not rooting for Frank Underwood because, dear God, that is scary and frightening because Kevin Spacey pretty much played himself as a politician. So, I mean, we're not talking about those guys.
Or like you're not supposed to be rooting for Walter White.
Yeah, exactly. And if you are rooting for Walter White, reevaluate your life choices.
Exactly.
But we're talking about some of those characters you're like, and they're supposed to be the hero? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And I've got one person. I think we're both gonna try and see who can we say is the worst character. I've got a couple actually that I've got floating in my mind, so I might bring up two. There's one that for sure.
I was gonna. There was a second one that I was gonna talk about, and actually started to think about examples, and then I really thought about what my choice is going to be. I'm like, oh no, I got to go with this person.
There you go. Well, that's enough time. We're gonna jump into this. All right. So for me, the worst. I mean, if you've seen this show, I don't know how you can root for this character. This was like one of those shows that made me realize most TV shows I don't really like the main character. Like I guess, with New Girl, Zoe Deschanel, she's fine. She's funny at times, but I'm like, she's the least strong character. I like all these other ones. Everybody loves Raymond. Ray's fine, but I love all the side characters. So this show made me realize how I usually like side characters in sitcoms, but I've never really actively hated the lead character like I had for this one. So about 15 years ago, there was a little show on CBS called How I Met Your Mother. And the main character, Ted Mosby, is an awful human being. Guys, He is terrible. The whole show is Ted Mosby's character talking to his kids, describing what the title is, How He Met the Kid's Mother. But as he's describing all this stuff, you get these glimpses as to what sort of a person he is, and he's just so terrible. First of all, just on the surface, he's unabashedly pretentious. He's like that sort of guy that is like, grammar Nazi, by the way, you didn't put a comma here. And you're like, dude, I'm saying it out loud. How can you tell if there's a comma there or not? He's that sort of person. They have, and there's episodes too. It doesn't matter if they like lampshade it and draw attention to it. Be like, by the way, we know he's pretentious. He had this party that his friends got kicked out of, and he was like, oh, maybe I'm too pretentious. Or the episode where they all realize things about each other, and they're like, you are always correcting everyone. Encyclopedia. How, it doesn't matter if they draw attention to it.
You have to pair that with likability, which they don't.
Exactly. He's so frustrating, and especially because we know people that are like that. We both know someone really well who he's Ted Mosby in certain ways. But I mean, that's not bad. That's annoying more than it's like a terrible human being. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, guys. Let's see, in one episode, one of these women, he dates like so many women, and he kind of sucks in his relationship with most of them.
And
one
also,
of them,
if we're to believe that this whole thing is him telling his kids, he tells his kids way too much about his sex life.
Absolutely. That is one of my points, because I'm sorry, do you want to hear about how your dad almost had a three-way? Or like, and again, they lampshade this too. They're like, I shouldn't be telling you this, should I? And I was like, am I a bad dad? Like, I don't care if you draw attention to the fact that you're like, you realize that this is bad. You're still doing it. You're still telling your kids some of the worst things, and you're also telling them about Barney, and you're like putting him in a positive light. He's an enabler to, let's call it what it is. He's an enabler to a rapist. This guy, Barney, is terrible himself, but like there's a point where you stop being a wingman and you start being a criminal accomplice. And he plays hard and loose with that line.
I have a point about Ted and Barney we'll get to in a minute. So what were you saying?
Okay, let's see some of the more specific stuff. There's a girl that he, many years ago when he was dating her, he dumped her through voicemail on her birthday when all of her friends were there and they heard it through the voicemail. Well, he gets back together with her and then realizes, wait, I don't really like this woman. And he dumps her again. Guess what? It's her birthday again. He dumps her twice on 2 different birthdays. He ruins these occasions for this woman because of his selfish inability to understand romance, love, or even himself.
That woman gets dumped on friends on her birthday as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And that woman gets killed in house. So, I mean, she's
rough go of it.
Bad life for her, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, like one of the defining characters of Ted that they kind of try and pass off as sweet is how he's this unabashed romantic. But because of how much of a romantic he is, he actually has such unrealistic expectations of what an actual relationship is that he poisons pretty much every single relationship he's in. And one of the reasons why is because they say it multiple times in the show, he never got over his infatuation with Robin, yet she's always around in his life. And that's like a problem for when he's with Victoria, because he almost cheats on Victoria when she's far away and they're gonna like hook up, Ted and Robin. And he's like, maybe I should actually tell her before I hook up with Robin or whatever. And that doesn't happen. And then he loses both. And then another point, he invites Robin to his wedding with another woman. And she's like, that's weird. And then he makes it worse. And he invites his soon-to-be wife. He invites her ex to the wedding. And he gets it like left at the altar. And you're supposed to feel bad for him. But it's like, no, don't invite your soon-to-be wife's ex-husband to a wedding. There's a problem with that. So, I mean, his relationship with Robin or his infatuation with her ruins all these other relationships. And I mean, even the whole point of everything is like the reason why people had such a problem with the ending of the show is because it destroyed all this character development just for him to eventually go back and say, hey, kids, this is pretty much me telling you this story to ask you permission to date Robin.
Yeah, it's like the creators kind of cheating. They made a point like, nope, Robin's not the mom. Robin's not the mom. Robin's not the mom. Oh, but Robin is the end game.
Yeah.
Like kind of
because they filmed the scenes like early on in season 1 before the kids could grow up. So they filmed like the final scenes of the show, and then they were pigeonholed and like, well, we have to make him end up with Robin. But guess what? When your show stays on for 6 or 7 seasons, you have to have your characters change. And they had no idea how they're going to make their characters change. So they pretty much hit a reset button at the end of the show and brought him back to like just negates all this character development.
Well, and if you know that's the ending, why did they go so far into the Robin and Barney hole?
Yeah, exactly.
I saw a thing where it's like, it's narrated through Ted. So I think maybe Barney wasn't as bad of a guy, but Ted wanted to make himself seem like the good guy, so he over-exaggerated Barney. Because in the beginning, Barney was the wingman and saying, hey, have you met Ted? And then all of a sudden, it's like Barney keeps getting worse and worse throughout the show, probably so that at the end, his kids are like, oh yeah, it's better that Robin's with you and not with this guy.
Yeah, and Ted even says that in some episodes. He says, because Robin should be with me, not with Barney. Like, he literally says that. And that's such a great point, because I was going to bring up, he is very possible an unreliable narrator. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, still, he still brings attention to some of this crappy stuff he does. He cheats. Like I said, he was going to cheat on Victoria. He helps Laura Prepon's character cheat. Like, she cheats on whatever because Laura Prepon cheated on Ted a long time ago. Yeah. And now, and that's what's crappy is Ted knows what that's like, and he still is an accomplice to help her cheat on whoever she's with now. And even worse, he breaks up a wedding after he himself had been left at the altar. He, in one of the final season, breaks up Victoria's wedding, which, like, what? That's a classic jerk move. He doesn't even end up with Victoria, but he still breaks up her wedding. And it's like, if you've ever gotten married, I know some people when they got married, there was some of those moments on their wedding day. Some people don't have this, but some people on their wedding day, they are looking at their eternity and like, This is it. This is the person I'm with for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So that might be a frightening thing for some people, but they get over it when they look at their spouse and they like remember how much they love them. But when you've got someone in your ear saying like, hey, you don't actually love them, you don't want to get married, like when you've got them convincing you out of it, who knows if you actually want that or not? You might just be in the moment afraid, and you use that moment to just ruin the rest of your life.
It's one of your most easily vulnerable and manipulatable spots.
Yes, absolutely. So, guys, we should not be rooting for Ted. Don't. When you watch How I Met Your Mother, do not root for Ted. Root for Marshall.
Yes.
Marshall is a good man.
But not always Lily, but Marshall.
Not always Lily. Sometimes she's a Grinch. But Marshall, he's a good guy.
Yeah, if you were to rank the characters, Marshall would be top for sure.
Yeah. Marshall is like all the way at the top, and then everyone else is way down here. Yeah. It's probably Lily, Robin, Barney, Ted.
Yeah. And if you're getting into secondary characters, maybe Ranjit, but that's about it.
Ranjit is probably number 2 after Marshall.
Yeah. Okay. So my show, I'm not sure if you ever watched the show. It's an old ABC Family TGIF show from the 90s. I'm talking about Cory Matthews from Boy Meets World.
I did watch it. I do like Boy Meets World. And if you were going to ruin my childhood, sir, I might have to leave.
Well, here's the thing. I'm not going to say anything disparaging about Mr. Feeney, so I think we're good.
Okay.
If you look at it, Cory, especially in the high school and college years, he's so insufferable. Like, the world is about him, and he feels like he's the moral center, and he has to be controlling everybody, especially with Sean. Like, he thinks, like, whether he thinks it or not, like, I know he has respect for Sean because they're one of the greatest TV bromances of all time. But I feel like on some level, Cory thinks that he knows what's best for Sean, and he just disregards what Sean wants to do. Like, when he's considering pursuing photography instead of going to college, he doesn't say, all right, I'm going to support you. No, he literally drags him out of the photography. He says, you're going to go to college. And then later on in college, when Sean has his really personal poetry that he doesn't feel comfortable reading at a poetry reading, Cory grabs his book after Sean leaves and reads his poem to an audience as personal without his permission. And Sean is rightly pissed about that.
Yikes.
Yeah. And then when Sean gets a letter from his mom that's explaining why she left, he rips it up in front of her. And even like Topanga, his wife, like he even is jealous about her. When she gets success and gets this job, he gets this pity party, like, oh, well, my wife's more successful than me. Not like, I'm proud of her and I like that she's successful. He's just, everything's got to be about him all the time. And it's just really kind of irritating when you watch it.
Yeah, the one thing that I'll give you that they do bring it out at one point. I think it might be the episode when Cory is like depressed after a breakup, and he is. This is one that I don't think they even showed that much in reruns. That they showed it the first time, but because of its subject matter, they didn't feel comfortable showing it reruns on like Disney Channel. But the episode where Cory starts drinking when he's still in high school, there was. And this is, you see this with his parents, and at least his dad owned up to it. But like his dad immediately, when they get caught with alcohol, Cory and Sean, that his dad blames Sean, and it highlights this thought for this family that they're better than Sean and his family because this family is better off financially.
Yeah,
now there's a lot of truth to making better choices at a number of times, but making better choices and being better as a person, they're not the same thing. And you can tell that they really missed that line. Yeah. And that Cory feels personally responsible for dragging Sean along and making sure that he makes the same choices as Cory, and that he does the thing that Cory does instead of like, Sean, what sort of person are you wanting to turn into, and what sort of person are you wanting to be? Yeah. There's a difference between being a good friend and like, I don't want you going down a bad path, and saying, I want you to go down my path.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, Cory has this loop of like, he is selfish, and then he talks to Mr. Feeney, and all of a sudden he knows what's right. And then next episode, he's selfish, and he talks to Mr. Feeney, and then he's good again. It's like, at a certain point, I get that that's the episodic nature of it, and you want to have that relationship, but I feel like there has to be some kind of, continuation and like growth as a person, which in some ways it's there, but in some ways Cory just continues to be like insufferable.
Yeah. Hey, remember when Corey and Sean got Janitor Bud fired?
Yeah. And then he never came back to the show at all.
And then he put the janitor's curse on him.
Yeah. And then in contrast, I know a lot of people give Eric crap for turning stupid as the show going on, which he totally did. They totally made Eric stupider. But Eric, even through being stupid, remained one of the most caring, genuine people. Like when Eric had like a serious moment, like you really felt for him more. Like Eric really cares about people, and they brought that back in Girl Meets World with him caring about people. Like some of the best episodes of that, which wasn't great, were the Eric episodes.
Eric saved the whole friendship in college when they got into the prank wars. It was that 2-part episode, and like their pranks got so big that their friendship broke apart, and it was, you know, like Eric said, it's friend against friend, brother against brother, and there are like these clear sides drawn. And then you see this flash forward episode of them like 20 years down the line if they continue on this path. But Eric was the only one that said, we can't keep doing this. You're right. Yeah. Eric's a good character, even if he is not all together with it.
Yeah. Eric said his head leaves, but his heart never stays. This is the best way to describe Eric. And yeah, it's all the other characters. Like I won't go through them all now, but like I have examples of Corey, kind of just trying to control Sean, Eric, Topanga, his parents, even Jack, who he didn't have a ton of relationship with. Like it's just Corey thinking, I'm the greatest. It's my responsibility to make sure everybody is what they need to be. It's like, no, you're just a kid, and just be their friend.
And that's why I'll give him a little bit of a pass. He was he was either a preschool, not preschool. Geez, not that early. He was either a middle schooler or a high schooler or early college throughout this time. So, I mean, you're learning these things, and hopefully he gets better. And I didn't watch any Girl Meets World, but I'm sure that they made Corey's character be a little bit more like the Feeny type for that show.
That's what they were going for.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you learn from being stupid. For me with Ted, like, he knows better. The first time we meet Ted is like mid-20s. So by your mid-20s, some of the stuff you're doing, you need to not be doing anymore by a significant margin. That should be dropped.
I will get that. I mean, maybe I'm being too harsh about a kid, but I don't know. I was kind of watching some Boy Meets World on Disney Plus in preparation. It's just I ended up just happenstancing on some episodes where it's like, Corey, come on, dude. It's just
Did you have a second person that you thought was a pretty terrible character too?
Yes, my second choice was Rory Gilmore from Gilmore Girls.
Now, Angie watches Gilmore Girls, and I've seen a little bit of it, but I haven't like actually watched it. I hear it in the background while I'm doing something else. So I think I'm going to agree with you because a little bit of what I hear from it, I'm like, Rory's a terrible person. She's annoying.
Well, the highlights are just real quick highlights. She starts out very not that way. She starts out growing up in this small town from her mom. But then when she starts getting more involved in her grandparents' world and her boyfriends in college, when everyone's telling her, Rory's the best, like her grandparents are like, how dare not everyone love Rory? And it just, that gets beaten down. And it's like, really? Like she gets a horrible sense of entitlement. And if you watch A Year in the Life, Gilmore Girls, the revival they did a few years ago, I thought Lorelai had a good story. Emily, the grandma, had a great story. Rory's story was terrible. Like we're told that she's just great journalism, but what we're shown is that she's not. And so, like, I don't know. You start out the show loving Rory, and by the end of it, you're like, what did they do?
Yeah. Angie said the same thing. She's like, I hate what they did with Rory's character. Okay, we talked about this last episode, so real quick. Who destroyed their character more? Gilmore Girls with Rory or The Office with Andy Bernard?
The Office, I think, because that was just such a hard drop with Andy. Like, Andy was always annoying, but he was always a little bit lovable annoying. And like you felt bad for him when the whole Dwight Angela cheating thing was going on. But at the end, it's like, I'm just going to leave on a boat, and then when I come back, I'm just going to be a total douche.
And even before he left on that boat, like they were setting the seeds for it with him and Aaron and him being selfish, and then it really came to a head when he came back.
Oh, yeah.
And now, and my other one that I think is terrible is this is more in a serious show and not a comedy, but still, I just, ooh. Meredith Grey from Grey's Anatomy. Have you ever seen Grey's Anatomy?
I think like once a long time ago. So I kind of like how you didn't know much about Gilmore Girls. I can't really speak to Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, you're not missing much. So Grey's Anatomy, I know some people they love it, and there's definitely some good episodes. There's one of the episodes that I think is just really compelling is like at the end of the fourth or fifth season. Their ending episode was a guy who a couple episodes earlier his wife had died and he held the hospital responsible, and then when he kind of let that anger fester over a couple episodes. And so for the last two episodes of the season, it starts with him bringing a gun to the hospital. And he goes on this shooting rampage to the hospital. And they handle it really well. Like, there's a way to do that that is really in bad taste, but I felt like they handled it well, and it was a very suspenseful episode. And, like, you kind of understood where the husband was coming from the things that I was saying, but like at the same time, you weren't rooting for him in any regards. And they also, that was a season that they had a lot of these new characters came in. So, I mean, from a writing point of view, they're also able to pull out, like get rid of some of these characters so that they didn't have too many people that they're paying. So that was probably like the best episode if you haven't seen that. But there's a lot of things that Meredith does. She's very, as you're talking with Corey, she's very much about her. She's very self-centered. She's very self-focused. And in some regards that can be admirable when, which in her first couple seasons I don't know how the hierarchy goes, but she's early in her internship. I don't know exactly like where the steps are, but when she first starts at the hospital, she really shouldn't be practicing medicine. She's not that great, but obviously she gets better, and she's the daughter of like one of the most prestigious surgeons that there ever was. Like, her mom was this forerunner that Meredith is constantly held to the standard of what her mom did. Mm-hmm. And so
kind of sounds like the Rory problem.
Yeah, and her mom has Alzheimer's in this show when we catch up to him, but we do see stuff in flashbacks. But because she has so many mother issues, and her mom was buried in her career, so the relationship between the mom and Meredith, you can give a little bit of a pass to her because like that really stinks. She didn't have a mom who was there for her, but that mother problem follows her into her adulthood, and it just really taints all of her relationships. And so like at one point, she meets a half-sister of hers that shares the same mom. And that half-sister is on the show for a couple seasons, but Meredith is just terrible to her. Like, she projects all of the mom issues she has with her mom onto her sister in a very unfair fashion. And her sister is a pretty good character and, like, doesn't deserve to be treated the way that she is. She had a husband, and her love interest in this show was oh my gosh, why am I blanking on his name? Who's the main guy from that's been in like all these other movies? He was in Enchanted, and he was in
was it
Patrick Dempsey? Yeah, there you go, man. I swear I know things. So she, like, early on, she hooks up with Patrick Dempsey, and then there's a little bit of like a will they won't they early on. She ends up getting married, and by the way, in the will they won't they part, he's married. Yeah, they're separated, but he's still married, and exactly. And so when they are hooking up at a certain point, and there's a little bit of a like with the will they won't they of like, am I going to go back to my wife that I'm separated with, or am I not? There's a little bit of that relationship drama, but you don't jump into it. It's the same sort of thing with Ted. It's like you got to have your clearly defined relationships. You can't just be messing around with some other person while there's still this other one on the hook. That's just a terrible way to treat people. Yeah. And so then she does ending up with him, and I know that like everyone was rooting for him, and so whatever. But they get married, and people love their marriage. but then a couple seasons later, he dies. Spoiler alert. I shouldn't. I say that after I spoil it for you. He dies, and he gets in this car accident. He's on like all this systems, this ventilation system, staying alive. By the way, Derek has like, I think it's 4 sisters. He has family that's still alive, but Meredith, the wife, she says her goodbye and then asks them to pull the plug. Does not give the family any chance. They don't really address this in the show. They just hope that you don't pay attention to it. But you know that he's got family. And for the purposes of the show, they're like, well, let's just make sure she has her moment. Guess what? He has family that they might want to say goodbye to. They might want to come to the hospital. You can't be that self-centered to be like, I get to decide that he dies right now with you not having any chance to say goodbye.
Seems like lazy writing to think like, oh, we should only care about the main character's feelings. Like, that's not how life works.
Exactly. And then there was, for her early seasons, there was a number of times where this arc came up that she was kind of suicidal. She was reckless with things that she did. She didn't really care about her life because of this depression that she had. And I know that depression is a hard thing to deal with, but at the same time, like, she was so against help. Like, sure, she goes through therapy and stuff like this, but she keeps wanting to die. She keeps putting herself in these positions to die. She is like in this river when it's really cold that she falls in or something like that. And then she just decides to stop treading water after like 15 seconds. She just decides, I'm not going to fight it anymore. And she starts to drown. And luckily she's saved. But I mean, there's this whole ordeal about it. Like, is she going to be okay? She had like some brain damage from it, stuff like that. There's another episode where a guy, he has like a bomb in his chest for like a homemade explosive that went haywire, got stuck in his ribs or something like that. So they're doing surgery, but the bomb is actually still active and it can blow up a part of the hospital if they're not careful. Well, guess what? She continues on with reckless abandon just because she grabs onto the bomb to hold it to make sure that it doesn't go off at a certain point. And it's just like, well, now you got to hold your hand there for the longest time or else it's going to blow up. And guess what? If it blows up, there's other people that are affected, not just you, Meredith. And it actually, when they call him this bomb squad, he is able to get it. And as he's disposing of it and walks away with it, it blows up and kills him. So yeah, your actions got someone else killed because you just didn't care. And then finally, I talked about the shooter. There was with that episode, he comes into a room where they're performing surgery. And in order to save Derek's life when he's on the table, she stands in the way of the gunman and Derek. Guess what? She's pregnant at the time. So it's like, I'm sorry, is Derek, after he gets shot and then he comes back from being shot and back to that, is he going to be really happy that his pregnant wife jumped in the way and got herself killed and took their kid with her? like, and they do address it, but just like I said with Ted, just because you address it doesn't mean it's okay.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm hearing all this for the first time. I've seen like one episode of the show a long time ago, but you're really not painting the main character in a very good light. But I believe it because I've seen enough shows like this. Like there are a lot of shows that we could have talked about for worst main character. It's just, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. And Shonda Rhimes, she did this show. She did Scandal. She's done a couple other shows. She likes to have main characters that their lives are just so dramatic. It's like there's a reason teenagers are drawn to these shows because teenagers' lives feel so dramatic. And so when they watch these characters who have such dramatic lives, they're like, I can relate so much. It's like real life isn't quite like this. It's not this dramatic. People don't die at like multiple, like, in your group of friends, you're not going to see 2 or 3 of them die within 1 year every single year. That's just not how life works.
Yeah, exactly. So I know you had in the first episode, you had an idea of ending the show with a trivia question.
Correct. And last episode's question was Michael Schur, the creator of shows like The Good Place, Parks and Rec, and why am I blanking? Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He played a character on a show that he was a writer on as well, The Office. And what character was that?
Mose Schrute.
Mose Schrute. The guy who gets mocked and made fun of that he doesn't have an ounce of common sense or brains. He comes up with some of the best comedies in a modern day that we've seen. So there you go.
I actually have one trivia question based on the show I talked about, Boy Meets World, which is, can you tell me what married couple in real life plays a married couple on Boy Meets World?
Ooh.
Do you know this one?
I have a guess.
All right. You can give me your guess off air. But yes. If you know what Boy Meets World married couple is married in real life.
You let us know. We would love to tell you if you're right or if you're wrong. Also, if you're like, hey, this is a cool podcast, here's my idea for an episode to do, we'll talk about some stuff that you guys might like. If you're like, I love this show and people don't talk about it enough, I'll watch it. Some of these shows that they don't get, like Disney Plus has a lot of great shows. I've started watching Gravity Falls on there, and that's a show that not a lot of people like talk about or have heard, but I know that the people who've watched it, they love it. It's got a huge following from the people that watch it. So, I mean, there's shows like that are out there. So let us know.
We're open to suggestion. We want to do a podcast people want to hear.
Exactly. Well, until next time, I'm Matt.
And I'm Brian.
And we're reminding you, keep watching.